They called us the galaxy's janitors, the cleanup crew, the species too primitive to join the Galactic Council, too weak to matter, too insignificant to fear. For 300 years, humanity scrubbed alien messes, hauled their garbage, and smiled while they spat on our faces. We built their stations, fought their wars as cannon fodder, and died in their mines for wages that wouldn't feed a pet. But the aliens never learned the most important lesson about janitors. We see everything. We know where all the bodies are buried. And after centuries of being kicked around, we've had time to plan. The Zephyrians thought they were so clever, demanding humanity choose between eternal servitude or total annihilation. They gave us 72 hours to surrender our home system or face their mighty armada. What they didn't expect was our answer: come and take it. Now the galaxy is about to learn why, back on ancient Earth, parents would whisper to their children about the American boogeyman, the sleeping giant you never, ever want to wake up. Because when Americans decide they've had enough, when they choose war over surrender, they don't just fight. They win. And this time, we're not fighting for alien masters. We're fighting for ourselves, for our children, for our right to exist as equals in a galaxy that tried to keep us as slaves. The final warning has been given. The boogeyman is awake, and he's pissed. Admiral Sarah Chun stood at the viewport of the UES Liberty, watching Earth turn slowly beneath her feet. The blue marble that had birthed humanity looked peaceful from here, but she knew that peace was about to shatter. In her hand, she held the communication device that had just delivered the Zephyrian ultimatum: 72 hours to surrender or face extinction. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, the first human to achieve flag rank in the Galactic Defense Force, receiving orders to betray her own species. The aliens who had promoted her, who had smiled and called her their shining example of human integration, now expected her to convince Earth to surrender without a fight. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Sarah had been born in the ruins of Detroit, back when humanity was still rebuilding from the resource wars. Her great-grandfather had fought in the last terrestrial conflict, the one that finally united Earth under a single government. He used to tell her stories about the old America, about a nation that never backed down from bullies, no matter how big they were. "Sarah," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see General Marcus Rodriguez, her old friend from the academy and now head of human colonial defense. His weathered face showed the stress of the last few hours. "The council's made their decision." "Let me guess," Sarah said, not turning from the viewport. "Complete capitulation. Hand over all human settlements, accept permanent status as an endangered species, and be grateful they're letting us live." "Worse." Marcus moved to stand beside her. "They want us to voluntarily enter the labor caste. Genetic modification to make us more compliant, mandatory sterilization controls, the works. They're calling it ensuring galactic stability." Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd seen what happened to species that entered the labor caste. The Rigelians had been proud warriors once, before the Galactic Council decided they were too aggressive for civilized society. Now they worked in the asteroid mines, their children bred in labs, their spirits broken after generations of servitude. "What's the alternative?" she asked, though she already knew. "Total extermination. They're assembling the largest fleet in galactic history. 400 ships, including 12 dreadnoughts. They plan to glass every human world and use our system as an example to other troublesome species." Sarah finally turned from the viewport to look at her oldest friend. "And what do you think we should do, Marcus?" The general was quiet for a long moment, staring out at Earth. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every human who had ever died fighting for freedom. "I think we should remind the galaxy why our ancestors carved 'Don't tread on me' into their flags." Sarah smiled for the first time in days. "I was hoping you'd say that." The emergency session of the Human Colonial Congress was unlike anything in the species' history. Representatives from every human world had gathered virtually, their holographic images filling the vast chamber beneath the Antarctic ice. President Elena Vasquez called for order, but The shouting continued. "This is suicide," screamed a representative from New Geneva. 400 ships. We have barely 30 combat-capable vessels. So we should just roll over and die, shot back the delegate from New Texas. My people didn't fight their way through the Kepler crisis just to become alien slaves. Sarah watched from the military advisor's gallery as humanity's leaders tore themselves apart. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others called for guerrilla warfare. A few suggested trying to flee to unexplored space. None of them seemed to grasp the true scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about humanity's survival. It was about every species that had been ground under the Galactic Council's boot. The Zephyrians and their allies had grown complacent, convinced that their technological superiority made them invincible. They'd forgotten that technology without the will to use, it was just expensive junk. President Vasquez finally restored order. "Admiral Chun, as our ranking officer in the Galactic Defense Force, what's your assessment of our military options?" Sarah stood, feeling the weight of every eye in the chamber. "Madam President, honorable delegates, I won't lie to you. In a conventional engagement, the Zephyrian fleet would destroy us in hours. Their ships are bigger, faster, and more heavily armed. Their energy shields can absorb anything in our arsenal." Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. Sarah held up her hand for silence. "However," she continued, "I didn't say we couldn't win. I said we couldn't win a conventional engagement." The New Geneva delegate scoffed. "What's the difference? Are you suggesting we try some kind of miracle?" Sarah's smile was cold as winter on Pluto. "No, sir. I'm suggesting we stop playing by their rules and start playing by ours." She activated her holographic display, showing the assembled fleet positions. For 3 centuries, humanity has served in the Galactic Defense Force as engineers, mechanics, and support personnel. We've built their ships, maintained their weapons, and learned every detail of their technology. We know exactly how their shields work, how their engines operate, and, most importantly, how to shut them down. Marcus stood from his position in the military section. "Admiral Chun is correct. What the Zephyrians see as our weakness, our role as galactic janitors, is actually our greatest strength. We have access to everything. Access doesn't matter if we can't use it," protested the delegate from Europa Station. "They'll see us coming light years away. Will they?" Sarah's display shifted to show shipping routes throughout the galaxy. Every day, thousands of human-crewed cargo ships move through Zephyrian space. Maintenance crews, supply runs, waste disposal. We're invisible to them because they've trained themselves not to see us. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "The Zephyrians are offering us a choice between slavery and death. But there's a third option they haven't considered. We can choose war. Real war. Not their sanitized, rules-based conflicts, but the kind of total warfare that forged humanity in the first place." President Vasquez leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Admiral?" "Operation Boogeyman," Sarah said, using the code name she and Marcus had developed years ago. "We accept their ultimatum with apparent compliance, then strike when they least expect it. Hit their shipyards, their supply lines, their command structures. Make them understand that enslaving humanity costs more than exterminating us would." "That's still suicide," the New Geneva delegate insisted. "Even if we damage their fleet, they'll just build more ships." Sarah shook her head. "You're thinking like a human delegate. The Zephyrian Empire spans 1,000 worlds, but it's built on the assumption that subject species will never unite against them. Every client race is watching this confrontation. If we prove that the Council can be hurt, can be fought, how long before the others join us?" The chamber erupted in debate again. Some delegates called it madness. Others wondered if it might actually work. The representative from New Texas stood up. "I've heard enough," she declared. "My people came to space because Earth wasn't big enough for their dreams. We didn't come this far to crawl on our bellies before alien tyrants." Texas votes for war. One by one, other delegates began to stand. New California, Asteroid Belt Consortium, the Martian republics. Not all of them. The core worlds were too terrified to risk everything. But enough. More than enough. President Vasquez called for the final vote. All those in favor of Operation Boogeyman. The results appeared on the main screen. 847 in favor, 412 against, 97 abstentions. Humanity had chosen war. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find an elderly man she didn't recognize, his weathered face marked by decades in space. "Admiral," he said quietly. "I'm Colonel James Patterson, retired. I commanded the first human settlement ship to leave the solar system." "An honor, sir," Sarah replied, recognizing the name from her history classes. The old colonel smiled. "I wanted to tell you something, young lady. My grandfather fought in the Second World War back on Earth. He used to say that Americans have a special talent. We're the only people crazy enough to charge a machine gun nest because it's the right thing to do." He looked out at the Earth visible through the chamber's main viewport. "Today, you reminded me why we came to the stars in the first place. Not to bow and scrape before alien masters, but to carry the torch of human freedom to every corner of the galaxy." As Sarah watched him walk away, she thought about her great-grandfather's stories, about a nation that had faced impossible odds, and won through sheer bloody-minded determination. The Zephyrians thought they were giving humanity a choice between surrender and extinction. They were about to learn that Americans have been dealing with bullies a lot longer than they've been dealing with aliens. And there was one thing every bully learned eventually. When you corner something with nothing left to lose, you'd better be ready for the fight of your life. The 72-hour countdown had begun, but instead of preparing for surrender, humanity was preparing for war. The kind of war that would echo through the galaxy for generations. The American boogeyman was waking up, and he was bringing friends. Captain Jake Morrison had been hauling garbage for the Zephyrian Empire for 15 years. His ship, the Rosie, looked like every other waste disposal vessel in the fleet. Ugly, utilitarian, and completely beneath the notice of alien security forces, which was exactly what made it perfect for what he was about to do. He floated in the cargo bay, checking the hidden compartments one last time. Where the manifest said, biological waste processors, Jake had installed military-grade fusion charges. Where it listed atmospheric recycling units, he'd packed enough weapons to arm a small army. The Zephyrians had inspected his ship hundreds of times over the years, but they'd never bothered to look past the surface. After all, who would suspect a garbage man? "Jake," came his engineer's voice over the comm. "We're getting the final updates from Admiral Chun. Operation Boogeyman is a go." Jake smiled grimly. The Admiral had chosen the codename well. Throughout human history, parents had used the American boogeyman to scare children into behaving. The sleeping giant who would come for you if you pushed too far. Now, the galaxy was about to meet the real thing. The plan was insane, brilliant, and typically human. While the Zephyrian fleet gathered at the edge of human space for their grand demonstration of power, thousands of human support vessels would already be inside their territory. Maintenance crews supply ships, waste haulers, all the invisible infrastructure that kept the Galactic Empire running. All of them carrying hidden weapons, and crews who'd spent their entire lives learning alien weak points. "Rosie to control," Jake said into his comm. "Package delivery confirmed for Zephyrian Prime. ETA 6 hours. Acknowledged, Rosie. Remember, kids, once you ring the doorbell, there's no going back." Jake checked his chronometer. In exactly 6 hours and 37 minutes, every human ship in Zephyrian space would simultaneously reveal their true purpose. Supply ships would become raiders. Maintenance crews would become saboteurs. Garbage haulers would become bombers. The Zephyrians thought they were facing 30 human warships. They had no idea they were actually facing 30,000. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Destiny, watching the pathetic human fleet through the main viewer. 30 small ships arranged in what they probably thought was a defensive formation. It would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. "Status report," he commanded. All fleet elements in position, Admiral, his tactical officer responded. 400 ships ready to commence bombardment on your order. The humans show no signs of surrender. Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed in what passed for a smile among his species. Typical human stubbornness. They would rather die gloriously than live pragmatically. Very well. Open a channel to the human commander. The image of Admiral Chun appeared on his screen, her face calm despite facing certain death. Vextar felt a moment of respect for the primitive creature. She had courage, he'd give her that. Admiral Chun, he said in perfectly accented English. This is your final opportunity to surrender. Our terms remain unchanged. Submit to labor caste integration, and your species will be allowed to serve the Empire. Refuse and face extinction. The human admiral was quiet for a long moment, and Vextar wondered if she was finally grasping the hopelessness of her situation. Then she spoke, and her words chilled him to the bone. Admiral Vextar, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that humanity gave you a choice too. You could have treated us as equals, as partners in building a better galaxy. Instead, you chose to see us as slaves. That was your mistake. Brave word from someone about to die, Vextar replied. Chen's smile was terrifying in its confidence. Who said anything about dying? You see, Admiral, you've made the same mistake every bully in history has made. You assumed that because you could hurt us, we couldn't hurt you back. Before Vextar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout his ship. His tactical officer's voice cracked with panic. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the Empire. Every supply depot, every orbital facility, every major shipyard, they're all under attack. On Zirian Station, Engineer First Class Maria Santos had been working the night shift for 3 months, slowly gaining access to the facility's main reactor. The Zephyrians had stopped noticing her weeks ago, just another human drone maintaining their precious equipment. They had no idea she'd been born in the ruins of Chernobyl, where her family had spent generations learning to dance with nuclear fire. Control, this is Santos, she whispered into her hidden communicator. I'm in position at the main reactor, ready to make some fireworks. Negative, Santos. This isn't about destruction. It's about sending a message. Disable their power grid, but leave the civilian sections intact. We're not terrorists. Maria smiled as she began her work. That was the difference between humanity and the Zephyrians. Even in war, humans tried to minimize innocent casualties. The aliens saw civilians as acceptable losses in their quest for dominance. 20 minutes later, Zirian Station went dark. The massive orbital facility that coordinated shipping for 3 sectors suddenly found itself drifting powerless in space. But the residential areas remained safely illuminated, and the life support systems continued running. Similar scenes played out across the Zephyrian Empire. At the Rigel shipyards, human maintenance crews simultaneously sabotaged every vessel under construction. On Antares Prime, cargo haulers revealed hidden weapons and began systematic strikes on military installations while carefully avoiding population centers. In the asteroid belt of Vega, mining ships turned their industrial equipment into weapons of war. The genius of Operation Boogeyman wasn't just its scope, it was its precision. Every target had been chosen not to maximize casualties, but to maximize impact. Shipyards, command centers, communication relays. The nerve centers of Zephyrian power, struck simultaneously by an enemy they'd never bothered to see coming. Commander Zeklon watched in horror as his supply depot burned. The human cargo ship that had delivered medical supplies that morning had turned out to be carrying enough explosives to level half his facility. But what disturbed him more than the destruction was the message painted on the depot wall in glowing letters. We see you. We are everywhere. Choose peace. He activated his emergency communicator. Fleet Command, this is Zeklon. My depot is gone, but they left the civilian quarters untouched. They could have killed thousands of non-combatants, but chose not to. These humans, they're not acting like any enemy I've ever faced. Similar reports flooded in from across the Empire. The humans were striking with surgical precision, crippling military assets while going to extraordinary lengths to avoid civilian casualties. It wasn't the behavior of a desperate species facing extinction. It was the calculated action of a military force that had been planning this for years. Back on the inevitable destiny, Admiral Vextar stared at the tactical displays in growing horror. Hundreds of red warning lights marked attacked installations across the Empire. In a single coordinated strike, the humans had done more damage to Zephyrian infrastructure than the last 3 rebellion attempts combined. How is this possible? He demanded. Our intelligence showed 30 human warships. 30. His intelligence officer's voice shook. Sir, we're detecting over 28,000 human vessels throughout the Empire. Cargo ships, maintenance craft, waste haulers, they were all carrying hidden weapons. They've been positioning themselves for months, maybe years. On the main viewer, Admiral Chen's image hadn't changed. She still wore that same terrifying smile. Surprised, Admiral? You shouldn't be. You see, when you treat an entire species as invisible servants for 3 centuries, you forget they can see everything you do. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every dirty secret. Vextar's mandibles clicked in agitation. You're terrorists, attacking civilian infrastructure. Chen's expression hardened. Check your casualty reports, Admiral. We've been very careful to avoid harming innocent people. Unlike your planned genocide of humanity. The tactical officer's voice interrupted. Admiral, confirmed reports from 17 sectors. Infrastructure damaged or destroyed, but civilian casualties are negligible. They're targeting our military capacity while protecting non-combatants. Vextar felt his worldview crumbling. This wasn't how inferior species were supposed to behave. They were supposed to fight desperately and die heroically, not plan sophisticated operations that surgically dismantled his empire's war machine. What do you want? He found himself asking. Shun leaned forward. What we've always wanted, Admiral. Recognition as equals. An end to the labor caste system. Self-determination for all species in the galaxy. The right to exist as something more than your janitors. Impossible. The Council will never. The Council is about to have bigger problems, Chen interrupted. You see, Admiral, we've been talking to the other client species. The Rigelians remember what they were before you broke them. The Andromedans have been quietly building ships in the Outer Rim. The Tau Cetians have been developing some very interesting weapon technologies. Vextar's 4 eyes widened. You're talking about rebellion. I'm talking about revolution. The age of the Galactic Council is ending, Admiral. The question is whether it ends with negotiation or with a complete collapse of your empire. Because here's what you fail to understand about humans. We don't just fight for ourselves. We fight for everyone who can't fight back. The alarms continued blaring as more reports flooded in. The humans weren't just attacking Zephyrian assets. They were broadcasting their actions across the galaxy, showing every enslaved species that resistance was possible. Decades of careful control and psychological dominance were evaporating in a matter of hours. On his private channel, Vextar received an emergency message from the homeworld. The Zephyrian High Council was demanding immediate status reports. Other client species were beginning to mobilize. Trade routes were disrupted. The very foundations of their civilization were shaking. This is Admiral Chun to all Zephyrian forces, came the broadcast on all frequencies. We are prepared to cease hostilities immediately if you withdraw from human space and agree to negotiations regarding the status of all client species in the galaxy. You have 1 hour to respond. Vextar looked at his massive fleet, suddenly realizing how useless it was. He could destroy the human ships in front of him, but that wouldn't stop the thousands of other human vessels throughout the Empire. It wouldn't repair his damaged shipyards or restore communication with the Outer Rim. It wouldn't put down the rebellions that were already beginning on a dozen worlds. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Vextar faced an enemy that had outthought him completely. The humans hadn't just prepared for war. They prepared for the day after war. They'd shown the galaxy that the mighty Zephyrian Empire could be hurt, could be resisted, could be beaten. The American boogeyman wasn't just awake. He was teaching the entire galaxy how to fight back. The Regellian mining ship Broken Chain drifted in the asteroid belt of the Proxima System, its hull scarred by decades of forced labor. Commander Thekvar had served the Zephyrian Empire for 40 years, watching his proud warrior people reduced to nothing more than industrial slaves. But tonight, everything was different. "Commander," his communications officer reported, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "We're receiving the human broadcast on all frequencies. They're actually doing it. They're fighting back." Thekvar moved to the command console, his massive frame casting shadows across the dimly lit bridge. On the main screen, Admiral Chen's words echoed through the ship. "To all client species, to all who have suffered under the Galactic Council's oppression, today is the day we stand together. Today, we reclaim our freedom." Around the mining ship, other vessels began to stir. Regellian crews who had spent their lives breaking asteroids for alien masters were suddenly remembering what it felt like to break their oppressors instead. The hidden weapons caches they'd been building for generations were finally going to see the light of day. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, "we're detecting movement from the Andromedans in Sector 7. And the Tausetians are powering up their hidden shipyards. It's happening across the entire rim. Everyone's mobilizing." Thekvar's war-scarred face split into a fierce grin. "Signal all Regellian vessels. Today, we remember who we were before they collared us. Today, we become warriors again." In the depths of space, the revolution was spreading like wildfire. Species that had been crushed beneath the Zephyrian boot for centuries suddenly had hope again. The humans hadn't just shown them how to fight, they'd shown them how to win. On the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Destiny, Admiral Vextar watched his empire crumble in real time. The tactical display showed rebellions erupting on 17 worlds. His supply lines were cut. His communications network was compromised. And, worst of all, his own forces were beginning to waver. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, her voice barely above a whisper, "we're receiving reports of defections in the Outer Rim. The Centaurian Guard, the Vega Defense Fleet. They're refusing orders to suppress the rebellions." Vextar's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. "Impossible. Those units are commanded by Zephyrian officers." "Yes, sir. But their crews are 70% client species." "And, sir," the officer hesitated, "we're getting reports of human technical advisors aboard those ships. They've been there for years, maintaining the systems, training the crews." The full scope of the human strategy was becoming clear. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a revolution that had been carefully planned for decades. The humans had used their invisible status to position themselves throughout the Empire, not just as saboteurs, but as teachers. They've been showing other species how to resist, how to organize, how to hope. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge. "Admiral Vextar, I'm transmitting a data package to your ship. I think you'll find it very educational." The package arrived moments later, and Vextar's intelligence officer began analyzing it. Her face paled as she read the contents. "Sir, this is everything. Complete intelligence profiles on every Zephyrian military installation, detailed breakdowns of our defensive strategies, copies of classified council communications going back 50 years. How could they possibly have obtained?" Vextar began, then stopped as understanding dawned. "The maintenance crews." "Yes, sir. For 3 centuries, humans have been maintaining our computer systems, our communication networks, our data storage facilities. They've been copying everything, learning everything, preparing for this moment." On the main viewer, Admiral Chen nodded as if she could hear his thoughts. "You see, Admiral, when you treat people as furniture, they become invisible. And invisible people see everything. We know about the secret detention facilities on Rigel 7. We know about the genetic experiments you've been running on the Andromedans. We know about the planned population management operations against a dozen client species." Vextar felt his world collapsing. The humans hadn't just attacked his military. They'd exposed his government's darkest secrets. Across the Empire, Populations were learning about atrocities they'd never suspected, about plans for their own subjugation, about the true nature of Zephyrian rule. Captain Elena Rodriguez crouched in the ventilation shaft above the Zephyrian Command Center on Kepler Station. She'd been working as a systems maintenance specialist here for 2 years, slowly mapping every room, every security protocol, every weakness. Now, finally, it was time to put that knowledge to use. Phoenix 1 to all teams, she whispered into her communicator. The distraction is working. Zephyrian security is focused on the riots in the civilian sector. We have a clear path to the command center. Through the grating below, she could see Zephyrian officers rushing back and forth in panic. Their carefully ordered world was falling apart, and they had no idea how to respond. These were beings who had ruled through fear and technological superiority for so long that they'd forgotten how to adapt to unexpected challenges. Remember, she continued, we're not here to cause casualties. We secure the command center, broadcast our message, and get out. The goal is to show every client species that Zephyrian control can be broken. Elena dropped silently into the command center, her team following close behind. The Zephyrian officers were so focused on their screens that they didn't notice the humans until it was too late. Within minutes, the most secure facility in the sector was under human control. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Human Liberation Force. She broadcast on all frequencies. To our friends throughout the galaxy, Kepler Station is now under joint administration. All client species are welcome here. All slaves are free. The age of Zephyrian dominance is ending. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. Human technical specialists, maintenance crews, and support staff revealed themselves as highly trained special forces operators. They seized command centers, freed slave populations, and broadcasted messages of hope to oppressed peoples throughout the empire. But the humans were careful never to act alone. Every operation included personnel from other client species. Every victory was shared. This wasn't about human dominance replacing Zephyrian rule. It was about genuine liberation for all. On the remote world of New Tasmania, Dr. James Wright had spent 5 years cataloging alien-genetic research under the guise of a humble lab technician. The Zephyrians thought he was there to clean their equipment and file their data. They had no idea he held 3 doctorates in xenobiology and had been secretly documenting their illegal experiments. This is Dr. Wright broadcasting from the Zephyrian Genetic Research Facility on New Tasmania, he announced, his voice carrying across the galaxy. For the past 5 years, I have documented systematic torture, illegal genetic manipulation, and attempted genocide against 17 client species. I am now transmitting complete records of these atrocities to every news network, every government, and every citizen in the galaxy. The data burst that followed was devastating. Detailed records of Zephyrian scientists attempting to breed submission into entire populations. Plans to sterilize troublesome species. Evidence of medical experiments that violated every law of civilized society. Within hours, the broadcast had reached the Galactic Council homeworld. Protests erupted in the streets of Zephyrian cities as their own people learned what their government had been doing in their name. The carefully constructed facade of benevolent rule crumbled in the face of undeniable evidence. On the inevitable destiny, Admiral Vextar received an urgent communication from the High Council. The Supreme Chancellor's image appeared on his private screen, her face showing a level of panic he'd never seen before. Vextar, you must stop this immediately, she commanded. The humans have released classified information that threatens the stability of our entire civilization. Our own people are turning against us. The outer worlds are declaring independence. This has become a disaster beyond calculation. With respect, Chancellor, I no longer have the ability to stop this, Vextar replied. The humans have been planning this for generations. They've turned our own infrastructure against us, exposed our secrets, and united every oppressed species in the galaxy. We are facing a complete systemic collapse. The Chancellor's expression grew desperate. Then negotiate. Give them whatever they want. Promise reforms, offer concessions, anything to make this stop. Vextar looked at Admiral Chen's image on his main screen. The human commander was waiting patiently, as if she knew exactly what conversation he was having. When he switched back to the main channel, her smile told him she'd probably been monitoring his private communications as well. Admiral Chen, he said formally, I am prepared to discuss terms. Chen nodded. I'm glad to hear that, Admiral. But you need to understand, this isn't about terms between our species anymore. This is about fundamental changes to how the galaxy operates. The Age of Empire is ending. What exactly do you want? Vextar asked, though he suspected the answer would be far more radical than simple human independence. Complete dissolution of the labor caste system, Chen replied immediately. Full independence for all client species. Reparations for centuries of exploitation. Open trials for those responsible for the atrocities we've documented. And, most importantly, a new galactic government based on equality and mutual cooperation. Vextar felt his heart stop. You're talking about the complete destruction of our civilization. No, I admitted. We're talking about the birth of a new one. A civilization based on cooperation instead of domination, on justice instead of exploitation, on hope instead of fear. Around the galaxy, the revolution continued to spread. On worlds that had known only oppression for centuries, people were standing up for the first time. They were organizing, fighting back, and winning. The humans had lit a fire that would burn away the old order completely. The American boogeyman hadn't just awakened. He taught the entire galaxy how to dream of freedom. 3 months after the first shots of the revolution were fired, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, which had dominated known space for over a millennium, existed now only in history books and war crimes tribunals. In its place, a loose confederation of free worlds was struggling to build something that had never existed before, a truly democratic galactic government. Admiral Sarah Chun walked through the corridors of Unity Station, the converted Zephyrian command facility that now served as the provisional capital of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. Through the massive viewports, she could see ships from dozens of species working together to build a better future. Rigelian construction vessels worked alongside human engineering teams. Andromedan medical ships provided aid to refugees from former Zephyrian slave worlds. Tausetian science vessels shared their advanced technologies freely with anyone who needed them. It was beautiful. It was chaotic. It was exactly what she'd hoped for when she first conceived Operation Boogeyman. Admiral Chun called a familiar voice. She turned to see Ambassador Thekvar approaching, the former Rigelian mining commander, now serving as his people's representative to the new government. His scarred face showed the exhaustion they all felt, but his eyes burned with hope. Ambassador, she replied with a smile. How did the vote go? The Rigelian Assembly has formally ratified the Liberation Charter, he reported. All 47 of our worlds are now part of the Alliance. My people are free for the first time in 3 centuries. Sarah felt a surge of pride. The Liberation Charter had been humanity's gift to the galaxy, a document that enshrined the rights of all sentient species, outlawed slavery and forced labor, and established the principles of self-determination and mutual cooperation that would guide the new government. That makes 83 worlds, Sarah mused. Almost enough for full governmental authority. Actually, came another voice, it's 86 now. They turned to see Dr. Kexlan, the brilliant Andromedan scientist who had designed many of the weapons that made the revolution possible. Her translucent features glowed with excitement as she approached. The vegan collective just voted to join, she explained. And 2 more worlds in the Outer Rim have declared independence from Zephyrian rule. The momentum is building faster than we can track. Sarah nodded, but she could see the worry in both aliens' expressions. The rapid collapse of the old order had created as many problems as it had solved. Without the Zephyrian Empire's brutal but effective administrative system, trade routes were disrupted, communication networks were breaking down, and some worlds were descending into chaos. What's the latest from the Zephyrian homeworld? Sarah asked. Dr. Kexlin's glow dimmed slightly. Civil War. The military loyalists are fighting the democratic reformers, while both sides struggle against popular uprisings. Chancellor Vexana has lost control completely. Some of our intelligence sources suggest she's considering using their planet killer weapons. Sarah's blood ran cold. The Zephyrians possessed weapons capable of destroying entire star systems, terrible devices they'd used to cow rebellious worlds in the past. If they were desperate enough to use them, the liberation could turn into galactic genocide. We need to accelerate our timeline, she decided. How's Project Lighthouse coming along? Ambassador Thekvar grinned fiercely. Better than expected. The human technical teams have been working around the clock with our best engineers. We should have the new communication network online within days. Project Lighthouse was the Alliance's most ambitious undertaking. A completely new galactic communication system that couldn't be controlled or shut down by any single government. Using a combination of human ingenuity, Rigelian mining expertise, and Andromedan quantum technology, they were building a network that would connect every free world in real time. But more than just communication, Lighthouse represented something revolutionary, a truly democratic infrastructure. Instead of being controlled by central authority, the network would be maintained by all member worlds working together. No single species could dominate it, and no tyrant could silence it. Admiral, Dr. Kexlin said quietly, there's something else you should know. We've been monitoring Zephyrian military communications. Admiral Vextar is requesting a private meeting with you. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The Zephyrian admiral had withdrawn his remaining forces to the outer rim after the revolution began, neither surrendering nor continuing to fight. Intelligence suggested he was protecting refugee camps and maintaining order in regions where the local governments had collapsed. Interesting. Where does he want to meet? Neutral space. The old trading post at Junction 7. He's coming alone, under a flag of truce. Sarah considered for a moment. Junction 7 was deep in the asteroid belt between human and former Zephyrian space, about as neutral as any location could be. It was also where her great-grandfather had worked before the aliens arrived, mining precious metals that would eventually be used to build humanity's first starships. Set it up, she decided. But I'm not going alone. Full security detail, and make sure we have backup plans if this is a trap. 2 days later, Sarah found herself aboard a modified human courier ship, approaching the ancient trading post that had once been humanity's gateway to the stars. Junction 7 looked exactly as it had in the historical records, a ramshackle collection of docking bays and habitat modules held together by determination and desperation. Admiral Vextar was waiting for her in the station's main conference room, a sparse chamber that had seen countless negotiations over the decades. He looked older than she remembered, his 4 eyes showing a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. When she entered, he stood and offered a formal Zephyrian salute. Admiral Chun, he said in perfect English. Thank you for coming. Admiral Vextar, she replied, returning the salute. I have to admit, I'm curious why you wanted this meeting. Vextar gestured to a chair across from him. Because I believe we can prevent a catastrophe. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Sarah settled into the chair, her hand never straying far from her sidearm. Despite the truce, she'd learned never to fully trust former enemies. What kind of catastrophe are we talking about? The complete destruction of everything we've both worked for, Vextar replied grimly. My government is collapsing, Admiral. The hardliners who remain in power are planning to use our most devastating weapons rather than accept defeat. They would rather see the galaxy burn than let it slip from their control. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The planet killers. Worse, they're planning to target not just military installations, but population centers. Earth, New Rigel, the Andromedan colonies, any world that has joined your alliance. They believe that by demonstrating their willingness to commit complete genocide, they can terrify the remaining worlds into submission. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah had known this was a possibility, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach turn. When? Soon. Days, perhaps weeks. My sources inside the military command suggest they're waiting for their remaining forces to withdraw to safe positions before beginning the bombardment. Sarah studied the alien admiral's face, looking for any sign of deception. Why are you telling me this? You could have just let it happen. Vextar was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars through the conference room's viewport. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of profound regret. Because I've seen what you've built, Admiral. In 3 months, your alliance has accomplished something my empire couldn't achieve in 1,000 years. You've created genuine cooperation between species that have been enemies for centuries. You've established trade networks that benefit everyone equally. You've proven that democracy can work on a galactic scale. He turned back to face her. I spent my entire life believing that order could only be maintained through strength, that lesser species needed firm guidance to prevent chaos. You've shown me I was wrong. The humans and their allies haven't created chaos. You've created hope. Sarah leaned forward. What are you proposing? A joint operation. My remaining forces are still loyal to me, not to the dying government on our homeworld. If you can provide intelligence and tactical support, I can position my ships to intercept the planet killer weapons before they reach their targets. It was an enormous risk. Trusting a former enemy, coordinating with Zephyrian military units, potentially walking into a trap that could destroy the Alliance's leadership. But it was also their best chance to prevent the genocide of billions of innocent people. I'll need guarantees, Sarah said. Complete transparency, shared command authority, and immediate surrender of all weapons of mass destruction under Alliance supervision. Agreed, Vextar replied without hesitation. There's more, Admiral. I know the locations of all Zephyrian black sites, secret prisons, and research facilities. I can provide intelligence that will help you liberate thousands more worlds and millions more people. Sarah extended her hand across the table. Then, welcome to the Alliance, Admiral. I hope you're ready for democracy. It's messier than empire, but it's worth it. Vextar stared at her outstretched hand for a moment, then reached out and clasped it firmly. I've been watching your species for months now, Admiral. You fight like demons when you're cornered, but you show mercy to enemies who surrender. You could have obliterated my remaining forces, but instead you're offering partnership. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength my people never understood. As they shook hands, Sarah thought about her great-grandfather's stories of Americans who had faced impossible odds and found ways to win through determination and ingenuity. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of those who would choose tyranny over freedom. But for the first time in centuries, there was real hope for something better. Admiral, Vextar said quietly, I have one more piece of information you should know. The humans aren't the only species with a reputation as boogeymen. My people have legends too, stories of the day when the oppressed would rise up and overthrow their oppressors. We called it the time of breaking chains. He gestured toward the viewport, where ships from dozens of species worked together in the asteroid belt. I think that time has finally come. Sarah smiled as she watched a human construction ship help repair a damaged Rigelian vessel. The American boogeyman had awakened something in the galaxy that couldn't be put back to sleep. The age of empire was ending, and the age of freedom was just beginning. Outside, the stars shone a little brighter, as if the galaxy itself was celebrating the dawn of a new era. 1 year after the liberation began, Admiral Sarah Chun stood before the newly constructed Galactic Assembly, watching representatives from over 300 worlds take their seats in the Great Chamber. The building itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human architectural concepts merged with Rigelian construction techniques, powered by Andromedan energy systems, and decorated with art from dozens of different cultures. It was the physical embodiment of everything the revolution had fought to achieve. Delegates of the free galaxy, Sarah began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, and broadcasting to billions of beings across known space. Today marks the first anniversary of humanity's final warning to the Zephyrian Empire. Today, we celebrate not just our liberation, but the birth of a new kind of civilization. Applause thundered through the chamber, not just from the human delegation, but from representatives of species that had never known freedom before. Former slaves sat alongside former masters, all equal under the Liberation Charter. It was messy, chaotic, and absolutely beautiful. Sarah's mind drifted back to the events of the past year. The joint operation with Admiral Vextar had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. The planet killer weapons had been intercepted and destroyed before they could reach their targets. The hardline Zephyrian government had collapsed completely, replaced by a democratic coalition that immediately applied for alliance membership. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been terrorist attacks, refugee crises, and economic disruption, but the galaxy had held together. More importantly, it had grown stronger. A year ago, Sarah continued, many of you probably thought humanity's decision to fight back was suicide, a primitive species challenging the greatest empire in galactic history. But, you see, we had something the Empire never understood. We had each other. In the audience, she could see faces she recognized from the Revolution. Captain Jake Morrison, who had traded his garbage hauler for a proper starship, and now commanded one of the Alliance's fastest scout vessels. Dr. Maria Santos, who had become the Alliance's chief nuclear engineer and was leading efforts to clean up contaminated worlds. Colonel Elena Rodriguez, who now ran the joint training programs that were creating a new generation of multi-species military units. All of them had started as invisible servants, ignored by their alien masters. All of them had revealed themselves to be warriors, scientists, and leaders who would reshape the galaxy. The American boogeyman, Sarah said with a smile, was never about one nation or one species. It was about the idea that oppression always contains the seeds of its own destruction. That bullies always, eventually, pick on someone who hits back harder. On the main display behind her, images flashed of the Revolution's greatest moments. Human cargo ships revealing their hidden weapons. Rigelian mining crews seizing orbital stations. Andromedan research vessels broadcasting evidence of Zephyrian war crimes. Tau-Cetian colonists declaring independence and defending it successfully. All the species that had been dismissed as weak or primitive proving that freedom was worth any price. But today isn't just about looking back, Sarah announced. It's about looking forward to the challenges we still face and the opportunities we're creating together. Ambassador Thekvar rose from the Rigelian delegation. Admiral, if I may, my people have voted to propose a new joint project, the construction of deep space exploration vessels, crewed by volunteers from all Alliance worlds. It's time we learned what lies beyond the borders of our old prison. Dr. Kexlin stood from the Andromedan section. The Science Consortium supports this proposal. We've developed new propulsion technologies that could carry us to distant galaxies. Imagine what we might discover, what new civilizations we might meet as friends instead of conquerors. Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. This was what she dreamed of during those dark months of planning Operation Boogeyman. Not just freedom from oppression, but the freedom to explore, to discover, to become something greater than any of them could achieve alone. All in favor of the Deep Space Exploration Initiative, she called out. The response was overwhelming. Tentacles waved, appendages gestured, voices called out in a dozen different languages, all expressing the same sentiment. Yes. Yes to exploration, yes to cooperation, yes to the future. But even as the celebration continued, Sarah's thoughts turned to the reports that had been arriving from the galaxy's outer rim. Strange signals from unexplored space. Evidence of ancient civilizations that had vanished long before the Zephyrians rose to power. Hints that the known galaxy was just a small part of a much larger universe. After the formal session ended, Sarah made her way to the observation deck at the top of the assembly building. The view was spectacular. Unity Station's busy docks, where ships from hundreds of worlds traded freely. Construction sites where new habitats were being built for refugees who were finally free to choose where they lived. Training facilities where former enemies learned to work together. She wasn't alone on the observation deck. Admiral Vextar stood near the far railing, his 4 eyes fixed on the stars. In the years since their first meeting, he had become one of the Alliance's most trusted leaders, using his knowledge of Zephyrian infrastructure to help smooth the transition to democracy. But Sarah could see the melancholy in his posture. "Regrets?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. "Some," he admitted. "I think about all the years we wasted, all the potential we squandered. My people could have been partners in building this from the beginning. Instead, we chose the path of domination." Sarah nodded. "We all make mistakes, Admiral. The question is what we do about them." Vextar turned to look at her. "Your species has an unusual talent for forgiveness. Most of the beings in that assembly hall have every reason to hate everything Zephyrian, but they've welcomed my people as equals." "That's because we learned something important," Sarah replied. "Hatred is a luxury we can't afford. The galaxy is too big, too dangerous, too full of wonders for us to waste time fighting each other." As if to emphasize her point, a new alert chimed on her personal communicator. She glanced at the display and felt her blood run cold. "What is it?" Vextar asked, seeing her expression. "Long-range sensors have detected something," Sarah said, reading the report. "Multiple ships, unknown configuration, approaching from beyond the galactic rim. They're big, bigger than anything in our databases." They both stared out at the stars, suddenly, aware that their newly liberated galaxy might be about to face a challenge that would dwarf anything the Zephyrians had ever posed. But, as Sarah thought about it, she found herself smiling. "You know what, Admiral? I'm not worried." Vextar looked at her in surprise. "Unknown aliens with massive ships don't concern you?" "Oh, they concern me," Sarah replied. "But look around. A year ago, we were a collection of broken species ruled by tyrants. Now we're a united alliance that's proven it can face any challenge together. Whatever's coming from beyond the rim, they're not going to find the divided, conquered galaxy the Zephyrians ruled." She gestured toward the assembly building below them. "They're going to find something that's never existed before in galactic history. A true democracy, a real alliance, a civilization built on cooperation instead of conquest." Vextar followed her gaze to the busy stations and construction sites. "And if they come as conquerors?" Sarah's smile turned predatory. "Then, they're going to learn the same lesson the Zephyrians did. The American boogeyman doesn't just wake up once, he stays awake. And now he's got friends." In the months that followed, the mysterious ships continued their approach, ignoring all attempts at communication. The Alliance mobilized, but not in the way the old Empire would have. Instead of massing fleets for war, they organized scientific expeditions to learn about the newcomers. Instead of building weapons of mass destruction, they prepared welcome packages in thousands of different languages. Instead of assuming hostility, they prepared for the possibility of friendship. When the alien fleet finally arrived at the edge of Alliance space, they found something unprecedented in their long history of conquest, a civilization that greeted them with curiosity instead of fear, that offered cooperation instead of surrender, that had prepared for peace instead of war. The beings who emerged from those ships were ancient, powerful, and utterly bewildered. They had conquered 100 galaxies, enslaved 1,000 species, but they had never encountered anything like the Galactic Liberation Alliance. A civilization that had turned its former enemies into allies, that had chosen democracy over despotism, that had learned to see differences as strengths rather than weaknesses. The negotiations took months, but in the end, the ancient conquerors made a choice that shocked even themselves. They laid down their weapons, opened their borders, and asked to join the Alliance as equals. For the first time in their million-year history, they chose cooperation over conquest. Sarah Chun, now Supreme Admiral of the Alliance Defense Force, stood once again before the Galactic Assembly. But this time, the chamber was even larger, filled with representatives from 3 galaxies. The artwork on the walls showed styles that spanned eons of history. The languages being spoken included dialects that predated the rise of civilization on Earth. "Fellow beings," she began, and her voice carried to corners of the universe that had never heard words of peace. "Today we celebrate not just the liberation of our galaxy, but the transformation of the universe itself. Today we prove that the age of empires is truly ending, and the age of cooperation has begun." In the human delegation, she could see familiar faces grown older, but not weary. Jake Morrison, now commanding a deep space exploration fleet. Maria Santos, whose fusion reactors powered colonies in distant galaxies. Elena Rodriguez, training the largest multi-species military force in history. Not for conquest, but for protection of the innocent. They had all started as humanity's invisible servants, the people the galaxy overlooked. Now they were leaders in a civilization that spanned multiple galaxies, teaching ancient species the value of democracy and freedom. The American boogeyman had awakened more than just humanity's fighting spirit. He had awakened the universe's conscience, and that conscience would never go back to sleep. As the assembly erupted in celebration, thousands of species applauding with appendages, voices, and technologies Sarah couldn't even identify, she thought about her great-grandfather's stories one more time. Stories about a nation that never backed down from bullies, that always stood up for the underdog, that believed freedom was worth any sacrifice. He would have been proud to know that those values hadn't just survived the journey to the stars. They had transformed the universe itself. The boogeyman's work was done, but his legacy would echo through the cosmos for all eternity. A reminder that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks they can push around. Because when the janitor finally decides to clean house, nothing stays dirty for long.